management issue, and we'll look forward to having that discussion. In terms of national amusements concerned, they are prepared to volunteer these conditions as acceptable, based largely on the example of your neighbors. And they've worked there. These work for this instance here, which is a little different. And we're certainly, I'm not going to put words in your mouth, Tony, but they're certainly willing to live with them and abide by them.
Okay. These address all the concerns I had, so thank you very much.
Linda?
Well, I'm just wondering if this is the actual license that we're approving tonight, John?
That would be
These would be conditions that would be added to the license.
Would be added to the
Would
Tonight-
be added to the license.
Tonight you would be
So-
approving the application for the license.
Okay.
Right.
But these would be an addendum to the
To-
license,
To
right?
the license document once it's
Right.
issued.
Attached to it.
Because it's got to go up, come back down. You're going to then issue the license. The license would have attached to
To
it
it
some
conditions.
version of these conditions.
Okay, and these conditions are basically put together by you folks?
These were conditions that actually were put together in Dedham, because that's sort of the newest one that's similar. They had some different issues than we have. If you know the Dedham site,
Yep.
it traditionally had some access issues and some other things. So they made some changes, and that's why they were more concerned about the special events. But we took these, and these are what we reviewed with the chief and with Andy at our meeting.
Okay.
We thought appropriate to bring them forward because these are conditions that were on a similar facility. I would say, Tony, very similar.
Very
facility.
similar.
So the numbers basically on here, in all 15 auditoria is correct?
It's
And-
actually 14 auditoriums.
Okay.
14.
Well, I'm just, it's different kind of looking at a mock-up of something that we're
Yep.
approving. I don't know. But I just want, I think it sounds great. Welcome you, obviously, to the community, and I'm glad to hear that you do support the community itself, because that's huge in my heart, and I'm sure it would be huge welcome for that to happen. And my only other concern, obviously, was game days, and we've already gone over that, so best of luck.
Thank you.
Are you all set, Linda?
Yes, I am.
Paul?
You touched briefly, excuse me, my voice, on parking. There's no dedicated parking?
Not on a game day or full stadium event.
But there is otherwise on the weekend?
Oh, sure.
gonna be wide open.
It's wide open parking.
So it's not, there's no, cinema parking only, it's just wide open?
Yeah, it's wide. If you think about it, people will park probably in two places. At the lower level, where you go in with the atrium, because that'll sort of be the main, by its Tony, like better term, the main parking lot. But we do hope and expect that people will park on the upper North Plaza. They'll go into the plaza, they'll do some other shopping and say, let's go get a movie, let's go get something to eat. We fully expect that'll happen. So you might have some parking on the higher level along Route 1. I think the bulk of the parking is anticipated to be at the lower level. So if you pulled in today to the main light and you were going to coming into the stadium, right, you would go in that way, and then you're going to sort of turn into that big parking lot that's sort of on the grade. That's sort of where the cinema is sitting. So you're probably going to park there.
Sort of where all the construction guys are parking right now.
Pretty much.
Now, is this, when you talk about the dedicated area in the auditoriums where there's going to be alcohol served, I've been to Randolph and I've seen where you have the Lux, I think you call it.
Yep.
Same thing, right? No access into the lower part of the auditorium, no access from the lower part to the
Correct.
other area.
Correct.
So when you come down into that kind of lounge area, that's going to be a separate level totally? Are we going to be checking IDs with the tickets, going into the theater, or
It's a
coming
little,
off
it's a
an
little
escalator?
different at Patriot Place than it is at Randolph, because Randolph it's not a separate area. The common
Right.
traffic moves past those auditoriums. But in Patriot Place, it's a totally segregated area. So the IDs are being checked downstairs before you even walk up into the private area.
Okay.
And then you go up the stairs, and that's completely this entire yellow area that you see on your plan is entirely segregated from the remainder of the theater.
So you would be checking IDs then before we even
You
get into
wouldn't
that?
Before you even get up
You're
there.
You wouldn't
getting
actually
to
be
the
able to get
bottom
up
of
there
the
without
stairs.
your
Got
ID
it.
check.
Yeah.
It's the only way up is that stairway.
That's
right
it.
in, yeah,
Yeah.
okay.
Different than Randolph was a retrofit. They were
Exactly.
experimenting with it, so it's a little bit different. But this is, you could never get up the stairs unless you had your ID
This
check.
is a much better design.
Right.
Okay, and the Chatters Lounge, I probably missed it. Anybody can get in, 21 and older, just to drink, or are we checking IDs to get into Chatters?
Well, if you're under 21 years old, you can get into Chatters.
Restaurant.
It's a
The
restaurant.
Restaurant,
Just a
nightclub,
restaurant.
bar,
Got
lounge.
it.
Right.
So the servers will be checking IDs?
Servers will be checking IDs, yes.
Okay.
Yep.
That's it.
On your proposed regulation condition, why paragraph 1? And for special events only in all 14 auditoria, if we're confining the service of alcohol to the yellow areas as shown on the plan, what's the purpose of including that condition?
We're not confining it for a special event. If there wanted to be a corporate event or there wanted to be a charitable event.
Let me interrupt you, because I asked specifically earlier so we could cover that issue. Do you intend to serve alcohol outside of the specified yellowed areas on the plans? And I was told no. Now I'm being
Okay.
told, let's,
I apologize for the
okay.
confusion, Mr.
Then the
Chairman.
question is, if you're going to serve alcohol outside of the designated area on the license, what's the procedure to come before the town and say, we're holding a special event, we would like to serve alcohol outside of our licensed premises? Now we're back to the
Okay.
police detail matter, and the question as to whether or not we have to approve an extension of the license.
Mr. Chairman, in the Dedham example, I think is a good one, because it is actually nearly identical, but a 15 auditoria versus 14. And you ask a good question. The license application in Dedham, and this is modeled on, provides for it, and the board in that instance approved flexibility to allow for special events throughout, in that instance, all 15 auditoria. In this case, it would be all 14. The onus is on National Amusements to provide police details at all special events. Therefore, if you had one of the unrelated theaters that doesn't have a VIP section, and you wanted to have a birthday party there, or some sort of celebration at which alcohol was served, the onus is on the licensee to coordinate with the police department, because the obligation is on them to have a police detail there for every single.
If I may, then the strict license age verification checking that we have gone through has no application in a special event.
Well, there's a different verification process.
Let's
for
talk
special
about that then. What's your age verification process for a special event in any of the auditoria where I'm assuming the alcohol is going to be served? And that's question one. Question two, how are you going to serve alcohol in the segregated area of the auditoria if your yellowed areas are somehow walled off? You're losing me.
Well, for special events, for things like a Red Sox game, for instance, it's not going to be in that auditorium. It's not going to be in the Lux level of the VIP auditorium. It will be in a different auditorium.
Okay.
So there'll be a whole separate verification. We can talk to the chief about whether we would want to use a machine as well for that, but we never really we haven't talked about that yet. But there is a bracelet system.
And that is a condition that we've volunteered.
This is what we do this at several other locations across the company. There is an ID bracelet system where the ID is checked, and if you're 21 years or older, you get a bracelet.
Right.
And that person can purchase 2 drinks at a time, no more than that. And at these special events, there are detail officers stationed inside the auditorium where the special event is. And I know that we're talking about language that, unless the chief says you don't bother, it's an afternoon opera, it's not necessary. But other than that, typically there is a detail officer inside that auditorium whenever there's alcohol being sold.
All right, that's condition 1. And for special events only in all 14 auditoria. But I thought I just heard you say that a special event would be held in a non-alcohol licensed premises. So it's not all 14, it's the ones that don't
Well,
currently
the-
serve alcohol.
Well, the front of the auditorium doesn't serve
All
alcohol.
right.
So we're saying that you could have a special event in any of the 14 auditoriums.
I'm getting more
what it's saying.
conservative the longer I sit here.
Sorry.
I used to be very, sure, pass it along. I can't do that anymore. With the exception of special events, the VIP seating area and VIP lounge with alcoholic beverage shall be restricted to 21. We've already covered that. 3, your maximum special event is 4. That's what you're trying to get at with number 3. You can't have a special event and cover all 14.
No.
Only
You're right.
use 4.
And that was the
At the
commitment
max.
they made in that example, and they can certainly abide by it here.
All right. Restriction 4, Bob, you've recommended you strike technology and insert age verification system.
Authentication procedure or system.
Strike technology and insert,
Authentication procedure or system.
Excuse me, Mr. Chairman.
yes, Paul.
Bob, would that allow them, though, to just have a procedure of a human being checking the IDs as opposed to a...
It would, because what I've heard from them and from the chief is that there's multiple vendors and there's not necessarily a technology piece that's accepted industry-wide as being the thing to do. I will say that my personal experience in going to the Cinema Pub down in North Attleboro is that they do not have a scanning device, and they seem to be able to determine that I'm over 21.
Let's not forget the personnel's training.
Right, and the tip certification
You can't
is a
rely
lot.
on mechanics at all times.
Exactly.
We just want to use whatever is best.
So I think what I was hearing, and certainly for discussion, but what I was hearing is that there's not a set piece that can be used. There's no an optical scanner or anything right now, so this leaves it open-ended enough to where, as long as the chief is comfortable with what they're doing, they're able to do it.
Maybe we should put that, a procedure or system approved by the chief of police.
Well,
Sorry,
Maybe.
I
no, maybe, but what I'm saying, we visit these annually. If there's a problem up there, we're gonna, when the license comes around for renewal, we're gonna deal with it. So, maybe you consider me nitpicking tonight, but if there is a problem,
Mr. Chairman,
we'll deal with it.
and we, as Bill Towie and Tony had indicated to us, they have no interest they only asked for flexibility here, not knowing what that system may be. And they have every interest in enforcement.
I know, I understand. Agent identification, I thought you said it was gonna be a bracelet system. Is there an alternative to a bracelet system in number 5?
Well, the bracelet system is what we use everywhere.
So
And-
why don't we make it a bracelet system? If you wanna change it, come back.
Okay,
That's fine.
that's fine.
An age identification system.
Mr. Chairman, in my experience as a business owner, sometimes we use bracelets. We had a recent boxing event. We did not use bracelets because the boxing commission had their own bracelet system, and we felt it would become confusing, so we instead used the star stamp. I think that's the only concern I would have against being too specific.
Just asking them. If they use the star stamp, they said they were gonna use the bracelet system. And if you're gonna use that, then we'll use it. If there are things that you wanna use besides, then let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, the only system that we're currently using in any of our locations is the bracelet system.
So why don't we just say
We can live with that.
a non-transferable bracelet age identification system?
Okay, that's fine.
Now, number 7, you had proposed just listen to this if you would. In the event that the license holder believes no detail is necessary, it may request that the police chief waive this requirement so long as such waiver does not conflict with any other bylaw requiring a police detail.
At this point, we're only aware of regulations. But that seems acceptable from a general concept. I
So-
was trying to save words, but that's fine.
Well, with me around, Peter, you can't always do that. I'm giving you, in the event, if you don't think it's necessary, then sit down with Chief O'Leary, explain to him why you don't think it's necessary. And unless we have another bylaw in place that requires the police detail, he can grant you the waiver.
Are you aware of a bylaw?
I'm aware of a proposed bylaw.
But if there's a bylaw in the books and the chief doesn't have the power to waive it, so that would be a moot issue.
You mean a bylaw or regulation, Mr. Chairman?
What are you proposing, a bylaw or a regulation?
I have a regulation that we're gonna discuss tonight, given if the board has time.
Okay,
for
so
that.
it's not a bylaw, it's a regulation. We need to discuss the difference between a bylaw and a regulation?
No, but I think it's appropriate to say it's a regulation.
Why don't we do this? Why don't we cap it off at the end then? In the event that the license holder believes no detail is necessary, it may request that the police chief waive this requirement. Would that be acceptable, chief? Be acceptable to the applicant?
Yes.
What's the purpose of including a last call? Don't we stop serving at 12:30 under the license?
This is a carryover from Dedham where that was an issue.
We
You don't want that.
did check with the chief, and he expressed some comfort at that time.
You want that language in there, chief?
I'm sorry, I didn't have.
The 12:30 a.m. last call, Chief. 12:30 a.m. last call.
Yes.
Okay. Post a sign. I have a question. What is your expectation of what is the cost for your group to get this license from the town of Foxborough?
What is the cost expectation? I have no expectation for cost.
Has anybody explained to you any mechanism by which you have to purchase a right from the town for this license?
I don't know.
Has it been explained to your
There-
client?
There is a long process, and as far as John and I are aware, and we limit, obviously, our involvement to the immediate permitting and coordination of licenses with Andy Gallen and with yourselves. But as you know, these are a dozen licenses enacted by special act of the legislature.
And as I remember, because I've had a discussion with Bill Towey, who's one of the directors and works for Tony, is I think I told him there were filing fees and $5,000, which I think is what the legislation is.
Okay, so it's 5,000.
And their condition, that's right, that
That wouldn't have been
payment-
Tony. Bill Towey.
There's no additional fee being charged you by the town or any other entity for the issuance of this license beyond the 5,000?
There is.
There is.
The 5,000 was a special assessment in the
Right.
legislation, plus the annual license fee, which I think is $2,300, so in that range, something like that.
Okay.
And there's also a check of 100 to the town.
And there's
for
other
processing,
That's processing.
$200
CAM
to
charges
the
that are
Commonwealth for
associated with
filing.
the landlord-tenant relationship.
What are those?
There are a whole host of CAM charges that are assessed in each lease for
What does that mean, a CAM charge?
common area maintenance charges. So where there are common areas common to either the north or south plaza, those items typical to a lease are passed through to some extent to each tenant in appropriate prorations. And
Maybe I can make it a little clearer. James, if you got a 23,000 square foot building, and there's probably 4,000 square feet of hallway, main entrance area, that'll be assessed at $4 a square foot. This might be $20 a square foot, so everybody that rents would pay for that.
I just want to make sure that there's no understanding that the town of Foxborough is charging anything more than what the statute allowed. There was something appeared in the file relative to a liquor license application process and a $125,000 fee to cover that. Does that sound familiar to you?
It doesn't. Does it sound familiar to
that's
you?
not in this application. I believe that is the requirement for common area maintenance for all restaurants which are seeking liquor licenses.
There's an additional $125,000 fee being charged?
And that's assessed to every license, and it's a relationship that the tenant enters into with the landlord.
Oh, 'cause that's
due to
part of the
special
lease.
costs associated.
Security
yes.
deposits. Security deposits are normally computed for restaurants related to in projected value of a liquor license.
I'm sorry. So there is a $125,000 fee that the developer is charging to each liquor license app? No. Okay.
No, there's not. There are various fees and expenses that are charged to a liquor license holder or applicant under the license, under our leases.
Okay.
Some pay straight fees. Some are rental deals that are built into them, where we pay all the fees for build-out. The restaurant deals are all computed differently.
I just happened to come across this in the file. It looks to be a Town of Foxborough Patriot Place liquor license application process document. The applicant shall pay the developer $125,000 to cover the original license fee and cost incurred for the license availability. Is there anything to that?
That is the fee.
It might be on a particular lease. That might be in lieu of his security deposit. That's how we can.
I just want to be clear as to when businesses come to Foxborough and get a liquor license that the legislature authorized the town to issue, that we know what the applicant is paying for that license. And is it the $5,000 plus the $2,300, or is there an additional $125,000 fee being charged to these applicants?
These, in this particular case, National Amusements, which is the one I'm aware of, as I discussed with Mr. Toey, is and he's, I forget his title, Director of...
He's Vice President,
Vice
Senior Vice President.
As Andy outlined the fees, there's $5,000 pursuant to the statute, there's a bunch of other fees, there's an annual maintenance fee,
There's an annual license fee, that $5,000 is a one-time assessment to a new license.
Right.
That's the first year. And there's the annual renewal fee of $2,300. There's processing fees for advertising, a check to the state, and that's the only thing we have the applicant pay to us.
I don't, well, do you know who wrote this one? I just want to have an understanding as we go forward.
this was in this application?
It was in my package.
We had put that in the folder. An applicant for a license called us questioning the license fees and processing fees. So we detailed those to the person that called us. And they said, well, we paid the fees already. And I said, well, the only place you can make the application is to the town. I said, we haven't sent you any billing on fees. Could you show us what you're talking about? And they faxed that to us.
This is Randy Golson. This is a leasing document. There must have been a leasing proposal that tied into this, and this was an explanation about how to do it.
Yeah, this is not for.
This got
Which
nothing to do with
Okay,
this.
so
This
you're
has
not,
nothing to do with this at all.
No.
That's,
But it was one of the applicants for a license that called.
That's not contained in this application,
it isn't.
no.
But is this an NPP Development LLC document that's being sent out to prospective?
it's a leasing term sheet and an explanation of.
It doesn't say that, John. It says liquor license application
And
process.
how you apply for a liquor license. Because I haven't noticed at the top, it says Randy Goldstein, please contact.
Yeah.
Randy Goldstein's a leasing manager.
I just
for
want to
Patriot
be
Place.
clear that it says, within 10 days of the issuance of the license, which is us, applicant shall pay developer $125,000 to cover the original license fee and costs incurred for license availability. I thought that was all statutory done by the legislature. I just want to be clear.
As I understand that, I don't know what that form is, but I'm going to guess if it's got Randy Goldstein on it, that's some kind of a term sheet with a particular tenant.
Why don't we do this, if you can, it doesn't have anything to do with this applicant.
Absolutely not.
And why don't you get back to me on that, let's see what that's all about. This is a public hearing. Anyone from the public who wants to be heard on this application, Ms. Brew?
I just had a question.
Stand up, please, Lorraine. Lorraine Brew.
126 Mechanic Street. What is the total number of patrons then at any one time that could be consuming alcohol in all of the auditoria that are qualified and the restaurant?
The auditoria is 230 seats, and the restaurant is, what, 60? For chatters. 60, and then outside of the auditoria is 100 seats. So, but you couldn't have 100 people outside the auditoria and 230 in, because they're the same patrons. So.
Can you quantify that? Just give me a number.
380.
It's 4 times the 4 non-alcohol serving theaters, correct? That'd be the max, plus chatters?
Yeah, it would be 330, the auditorium, I'm sorry, 380, 230 for the Lux, 100 for the lounge, and 50 for the... Yeah, but you couldn't have 100 people in the lounge and in the auditorium at the same time.
You'd have 4 auditorium,
Correct, 2:30,
chatters,
which would be,
and the lounge area, and the boxes within those 5 theaters
correct.
at any one time.
But Tony's point is that practically, they're not gonna have 100 people in the lounge if they have no place to go with the theaters full.
I'm just trying to get an answer to
Yeah.
the number.
What if you were switching up, movie times were switching up?
Well,
People
typically
do
what
wait-
you have,
do they exit out the same door, or they go out like the old days, and I want you to go out the side doors and you dump in the parking lot?
I suppose there is a potential of having,
Overlay?
there's a potential of having, that would be 390, right? 380. There's a potential of having 380 patrons in the building at the same time, but it's unlikely that that would ever happen.
Tony, what's the seating capacity of the largest auditorium?
60 seats for the VIP area.
No. The special event, you can use the entire auditorium, right?
Yep.
What's the seating capacity of the largest auditorium?
If you look at Exhibit A, which I think is where you're going, Mr. Chairman, the largest auditorium, for example, 4, has a seat count of 299 seats.
Okay, so 4 times 299, if all 4
For a special
large,
event.
For a special event.
plus chatters, plus what was ever available inside the yellow area, since those have licenses that run, whatever, 1 to 11:30 or 12:30 every day, so 2,000?
No.
No, I
1,200.
don't think that could be.
You go, your largest theater is 300 seats. You can run a special event in that theater, you got 300 people potentially using alcohol. One theater. Multiply that by 4 because
There's
you,
only 2 with
I don't think you
290.
can multiply
okay,
it by
so
4.
we're just trying to get her a number.
Okay.
There's
Well,
2 400-seat theaters that do not currently have the capacity to serve alcohol.
There's 2 300-seat theaters.
2, 3, so there's 600. What are the next 2 sized ones, Peter?
There's 2 260s.
Okay, so that's 500, so that's 1,100. Then you have chatters, which serves
60.
60 people in the chatters?
Yep.
Really? I thought it was much bigger than that.
No,
And then you have the seating capacity of the yellowed areas is what?
230.
So I'm getting about 1,500. Does that answer your question, Lorraine?
Yes, thank you.
And that is likely, unlikely, based on
Fair
operations.
question. Anyone else? Sergeant Grace?
Mr. Chairman, one quick question on the advertisement. In the non-alcohol areas on a regular basis, is there going to be advertisement signs of alcohol? Because, for example, like the city of Revere, when they put the bar into the movie theater or the restaurant, there were community groups who did not want to see any alcohol signs, advertisements, where kids and under 21 people would be. Are all those signs, advertisements, going to be for VIP, the over 21 section only? Or are they going to be throughout the facility?
Sergeant, you raised a good question. As we understand it, based on what National Amusements has explained to us, the designated food and drink areas are isolated, and you haven't had the advantage of seeing the plan. We did share it with the chief, but they're isolated sort of in the center of the house, if you will. There is no connection between those areas and the general movie theaters, where there is no food or beverage service, except in the lobby. And there is no alcohol service.
Okay, so if you're under 21 and you're just going to the movie with your kids and stuff, you're not going to see advertisement signs for Budweiser?
You wouldn't have that availability either.
Okay, so. And one other question on the card scanning. Is there going to be a staff there checking the picture as well?
Yes.
And what is your policy when the picture doesn't match the person? Because that's what we know people do. They just borrow someone's license, scan it, over 21, you get the green light, off you go. Are you going to be, like some businesses notify us right away? Well, actually, we have detail officers on scene because.
And that's been our policy as well. If there's a problem with a photo not matching, then we notify the police.
So is that something we might want to mandate in the license? Because I'm just, maybe the board can look at that, because I hate to see people showing up scanning reject it and just walk back and say, "That was a good try." I
Mr.
wouldn't
Sergeant?
want kids to think that this is something they can try on a
Do
regular
we
basis.
currently do that with any other license holder?
I don't think currently we have any movie theaters that serve alcohol, Bob.
This is a completely new concept to us. I didn't expect to take an hour and a half doing this, frankly, I really didn't, but I think it's a complicated
And
matter.
actually, hold on. And yes, Funway had the machine, and they had a police officer present. As a matter of fact, the establishment gave their employees a monetary incentive to get those. And I believe the chief set a policy that we will charge every single person.
My only point is that I'm a license holder also, and I do follow that same practice. If I were to ever have an instance where a false ID were used, then I would notify the police department also. What I'm asking is, do we currently include that in our regulations for any other license holder?
Well, I think it's, as the chairman said, this is all new. So we're on new water, so this is the time to do it.
It's not that new, though.
Well, we're including an age verification condition that we don't have on any other license. We have a number of conditions here. We have really a shifting area where we're going to serve alcohol. We just want to do it right. We want you to run your business without problems, and we want to know what it is we're doing when the license comes up for renewal on a regular basis. That's what we want. I have a question first. Are you done, Sergeant?
One last thing, just
It is a public hearing. We'll hear from the public.
I'm sorry, I apologize. Just one last thing. For example, if this occurs and you guys have a policy that you call the police, okay? If there's no police on scene, nothing happens. Because they're just gonna walk away.
Well, Sergeant, you might have come in late. There is a commitment to have a detail inside the theater. Oh, I'm sorry, only on the weekends, so maybe you're,
And one last thing was school vacation. That was a huge issue in other cities and towns. That they have so many kids that they change their plans as well for police presence during school vacations for 7 days, because it's all day and all night.
thank you, Sergeant Hannon.
We're addressing everything inside the premises. What kind of contingencies or plans do you have to address issues out in the parking lot? We talked about overlay, Mr. Sullivan brought up. What type of policing is going to take place in the parking lot?
Well, I think that we're willing,
Where we have seen in other communities, Randolph and specifically Dedham, whether the problems were instigated or initiated inside the premises and were taken outside into the parking lot. What contingencies or plans to address those issues?
Let me, if you would. Sergeant, it's a good question. The commitment that National has made is to provide details whenever circumstances dictate, and that is their policy. If you look at their other facilities, you will see that as a history. I know the chief has made inquiries with his counterparts in other towns. He indicated as much to us, and that commitment is there, that precedent is there, and so if there were to be an issue, there would be likely police on the scene. I hope that addresses your question.
So there is no specific plan?
The policeman, whether it's one of your staff, would certainly, if it's an issue that arises outside of the premises, the police would be on scene, period, whether they're in the building or outside the building. There would be police presence there,
Both inside and outside?
whether it's inside or outside, as circumstances may require. I'm not trying to...
No, and I'm sorry that I'm not understanding specifically inside and outside. It's not one person inside that's also outside. I'm talking two different areas, inside the building and then outside the building. Two different issues, two different venues. I've heard...
There's no alcohol served outside.
No, I understand
And
that.
so, like any other premises, the advantage here is that where there are peak periods where these folks have, in their experience at other theaters, where circumstances warrant, they contact the police and prepare for details. That policeman will be on the premises. To the extent he needs to follow an issue outside, he's certainly well within his rights to do so.
We're talking...
In no other in no other circumstance in Foxborough do you have this frequency of police in a private restaurant establishment. Granted, and I completely agree with the chairman, that these circumstances are special, and that is why the police presence is
And in
there.
speaking to police officers from Dedham and Randolph, that's why I'm posing that question. No, they are not drinking in the parking lot with alcohol from the premises. They're bringing alcohol to the area, and then whatever develops inside then gets carried outside. And that's what I'm asking, how will that be addressed? You're saying the person who's inside is well within their right to follow outside, deal with what's outside, and then there's nobody inside.
I think you could anticipate that circumstance with any establishment.
Well, but then you also have to drop back to remember, the site plan approval is a requirement for the security. There's been coordination with the chief with respect to having other
Mr. Tui,
duty
I did not
officers.
ask about security. I asked
Well,
about
but
police
security, but
presence.
also police detail, and I think discussions with Mr. Briggs, who's in charge of the overall security, to have, police presence, and the timing of the police presence, and I know that's an ongoing discussion with the chief, that there's gonna be in the area and at Patriot Place, not only what they have for security, but also coordination to have police detail.
Mr. Chairman?
Sir.
Can I just ask a simple question? Fridays and Saturdays, like the other movie theaters, are you gonna have police officers present to handle the crowds, the kids, the problems, to help us on shift? I don't wanna hear security. Are you going to have like 2 police officers inside and 2 outside?
Fair question.
Just a number.
Tony?
just-
I would have to say that yes, what we want to work with the chief on what that quantity is. What is the right quantity? To have police presence outside and inside is something common. Obviously, you've talked to Randolph and you've talked to Dedham, so you know this already. And we're the same company, we're not a different company, so we want to work with the chief and do whatever is required, and we'll get his expert opinion.
And we appreciate that answer,
Yeah.
because sometimes we have a concern that security becomes a private security
Well,
entity.
we have worked with security companies, and if you look at Randolph, for instance, we have a private security company in a vehicle that patrols the parking lot, but we also have a police presence outside. And at Dedham, we don't have security at all. We tried that, it just didn't work at Dedham.
No, you have 2 inside, you have 2
You-
outside.
you know, yeah, you
You
know.
have someone in the lot,
That's
someone
right,
on the
yeah.
side.
Tony, if
Yeah.
I may,
Yeah.
what Sergeant Grace and Sergeant Hanna are trying to say is that if there's not a detail on site and something breaks out that gets escalated, we only got 3, possibly 4 people on duty for the night, and all our policing is going to one location. They're trying to completely make sure there is no altercation. I appreciate what they're trying to do, and that's what they're very passionate about their jobs and the safety of the community, and that's why they're bringing it up.
And I can appreciate that, and since they've done some research, they know how we operate.
Right.
And if you look at the theaters that Joe has worked at, if you look at Revere, we have police presence in the lobby, we have police presence in the parking lot. And that's
It's
not
basically-
uncommon for us to do, but again, we want to work with the chief and find out what's.
Well, it sounds to me like it's gonna have to be a very close-knitted work in progress, and I
Absolutely.
I think with Chief O'Leary and working together with his sergeants and everything, they'll be very much in communication with you and your people.
Mr. Norton, you had your hand up at
Yes,
the public
Dennis
hearing.
Norton, before Arbor Lane. I was persuaded by Sergeant Grace's argument about writing that additional component into the, into the license, and I think that probably it would be easy enough for the selectmen to address the issue that Mr. Hickey raised about it not being in other licenses by simply rolling that into all the other licenses when they came up for a hearing.
I do believe that we are going to be increasingly careful and scrutinizing as these licenses come in because of the awakening, in me anyway, of the scope and size of the potential problems to be generated by the number of establishments and the strain it may or may not place, depending on how well the independent businesses serve.
The idea that somebody would ever allow someone to walk away who presented a false ID is incredible to me, and I think it should be written in. And I can't imagine, though, I can't imagine being in a situation where I was an owner or the person designated to check the ID, not having a police officer present to call upon to enforce that, though.
Well, Dennis, they would be pretty spread out even with two inside in an area this big. And to ask a private citizen to try and control and detain that person in the license, I don't think either one of our officers want that. It's all gonna be on video, I imagine, the whole place gets surveillance. So I would imagine, I mean, you can't police everything. These guys will tell you that for a
I was just assuming
fact.
that it would be placed into the hands of the person doing the checking. And if I was
Yes.
checking an ID, I would say, hand that to me, please, okay? Not
Correct, but what are you
And then
gonna tell the high
detain
school
it. No,
student?
I don't think you can
No, I think-
restrain someone, but you can keep the.
I think
Well,
the
would
value
you,
of that-
I see your point, but I don't think John or Sergeant Grace would want that person or that particular employee, no matter his or her size, to say, I'm not giving you your license back. What, am I correct, gentlemen?
No, they don't give it back at all. Usually, we have one checkpoint, isn't that what you guys have mentioned, to go to that alcohol-related area? There's one
Right.
checkpoint, so we're not running everywhere. We have a police officer with the staff checking the ID, we're there to supplement their problems, period. One area, this is where all the people over 21 are going.
Okay.
Mandate a person at that spot, it's done.
If I may, to Mr. Naughton's worthy point, the intent, of course, is to not give back the license, but unfortunately, there are people who may become belligerent, and those strategies to keep somebody there until we can get police presence on the scene, or strategies to ensure that we're at least able to identify and pass that information along, are covered through the TIP certification training process. So there's a number of different.
I don't know what that is.
TIPS is it's an accepted certification process in Massachusetts that all servers should. They've already stated that they're going to have all their managers and servers take the training, and it's either an on-site live training or a location-specific training or an online certification process training.
But I guess I came late and missed that part.
No, we actually didn't cover it because we've gone through it several times. So, but it is strategies to how to deal with illegals are covered. So it's a good point.
If I may, Sergeant Grace,
One last.
I want to ask you a question first.
Sure, absolutely.
I understand what you're saying, where you would have an officer in charge, or not in charge, in the area of being ID'd. But in a situation with random IDing going in different situations, like the Chatter Club, where the waitress or the server would ID the person, that's what I'm addressing to Mr. Norton, that I'm not gonna, and I don't think you, tell me yes you agree or not, that you would want a civilian to try and detain somebody's phony ID. That's my question.
No,
A civilian?
Well, it's a phony ID, because the guy's gonna walk away, it's on his ID. We don't know.
All right, now I understand. All right, but I'm saying, but what if it is that person's ID and they're per se? What if
So
the
they leave. And
They
say,
leave.
"What's
They
the
they always leave. They don't confront the person and say that's my buddy's license and take it back. What if it's your?
Sometimes.
All right, that's what I'm saying. So you're telling me you're fine with a civilian holding the license?
At
I'm
the
just
check-
asking.
No, but the check area to go into the.
I understand that, but you're
If a police
misunderstanding me
officer's
again.
present, first of all, fake ID's not coming.
That's
They're turning around.
in that area. But in every restaurant, not just this particular cinema. I went to Jimmy's Pub last night with my family for dinner. If I wanted a beer, somebody wanted a beer and they had a phony ID, are you asking the waitress or the server or anybody else to retain that person's phony ID?
You don't want anyone to get hurt, and it's not worth it.
That, but, so, John, am I trying to make the right point here, that to Mr. Norton, that you don't want a civilian trying to, am I incorrect? I'm just
You're
asking.
not at all incorrect. I concur with the fact that you do not want somebody taking property off somebody else, even though it is a phony ID or fake altered ID, and trying to retain it. A lot of businesses in the community offer financial incentive to their employees to confiscate altered, phony, or whatever verbiage you want to use for identification presented to purchase alcohol. There have been times when there have been altercations over the fact that the employee tried to retain the license, and sometimes people pay money to have licenses or other forms of identification made so that with the express purpose of buying alcoholic beverages. We've had instances where the clerk or employee has tried to retain it, and then there's been an incident where the person who paid to have that license or whatever other document they tend to use to purchase the alcoholic beverage wanting that back. They didn't get in, okay, but give me my ID back, and then that's problematic too.
So we don't wanna-
get into a situation where they're trying to take the license or the ID, altered or phony ID, and then get into a tugging match back and forth over an ID.
Right, we don't want to regulate something like that.
That's,
Chief?
does that answer your question, Dennis?
Well, what is the solution then, let me ask you?
I mean, it's not a perfect world, buddy.
I
I
think-
mean, I'll tell you, everybody's got some gimmick
Sure.
going.
I'm hearing there is no solution.
No, I think the solution is issue the license with the conditions that we've discussed. But I don't think that the solution is to mandate a seizure by a civilian.
I never meant mandate seizure, I meant,
Mandate, there you go, Frank, I used the
I
word.
meant mandate, I meant mandate the officer being
You
present.
can quote me this time, right?
So that at that
Get over it,
location
Jim.
where everyone goes in to drink in the movie theater, mandate that in the license as the checkpoint. Not mandate the employee taking the license,
Is
but
that-
mandate on the license, that's where a police officer will stand.
Is-
Maybe
Tony-
on Thursday, Friday, Saturday nights, where all kids are gonna try to go in, and
Okay.
we can avoid all our problems.
Tony, is that what you do now? Is there a police officer in the lobby right where everybody's going to be served in that general area?
There is not, we have not designated a police officer to stand in a certain area to check IDs. We have not done that. There's a police officer in the lobby at Randolph. He moves about. He goes to the checkpoint, he'll see what's happening, but he does not stay there. He just moves throughout the lobby.
Chief, did you have something you wanted to say on this issue?
The checking of IDs falls upon the responsibility of the license holder, his employees, to make sure that minors are not served. And if they do come across a false ID, as they do, we're very fortunate in the community, they do report those to the police. But I have reservation about having a civilian licensee trying to stop an individual from leaving the facility, or if he demands the license back, you have to take a look at the individual you're dealing with, and, you know, depending on who the license checker is. A manager probably has more experience in dealing with irate people than perhaps a 19-year-old part-time employee in dealing with something. But I think it's up to each individual facility to establish what role they want played by their people when they discover a false ID. And we can certainly work with any of the licensees to make sure that appropriate steps are taken so we can find out who the licensee is, because even offering it is an arrestable offense.
James, if I may?
Sure.
Troop 971, this could go on for quite some time. I know it's a school night, so Linda has brought to my attention that it's 20 and 9, so don't feel that you have to stay here for this, because it could be rather extensive and long. And I see some of the fathers out there, a couple who I know staring at me through the door, a couple of mothers, and so.
Oh, sure, leave after Mr. Sullivan invites you to leave. When I invite you to leave, you stay.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks for coming.
Good night, Robin.
Bye.
So what did you learn tonight?
Thank you, Linda.
On these restrictions, number 7 says a Foxborough police officer, but I really think that it needs to say one or more Foxborough police officers as determined by the police chief will be on duty at all special events. That's really what we're getting at here with this conditions, correct?
Correct.
Okay.
I think they
Any other,
enjoyed it.
anything new
No,
from
it's
the,
getting late.
during the public hearing that we haven't discussed? Lorraine?
I don't think this is new, but I just wanted to clarify, was it established that neither Quincy Amusements or National Amusements paid $125,000 fee for the liquor license?
No, what, I have a memo, a note I'm going to give to Attorney Tewig. Attached is the document in question. I understood that you agreed to look into who generated this document and under what circumstances it is intended to generate a fee of $125,000 payable to the developer. And I'm going to give this to John afterwards, and he's going to look into it. It's been established for purposes of this application on the record that this applicant wasn't required to pay $125,000 to any entity, just the standard, normal statutory fees due to the town of Foxborough.
in the Commonwealth.
And the Commonwealth.
Mr. Chairman, motion to close the public hearing.
Second, a motion has been made and seconded to close the public hearing. Is there a further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None? Do we need to discuss this anymore?
No.
I'd like to make a motion that we grant to Quincy Amusements, Inc. An alcoholic beverage license for the Showcase Cinema Deluxe at Patriot Place, as per the application submitted to the town. Let me just find a date on it.
2/19, February 19th, 2008.
Dated February 19th, 2008, with the conditions as outlined in the Quincy Amusement, Inc. all alcoholic beverage licenses conditions, and I have marked them up, so if you, that's the motion. Is there a second?
Can I read it first?
Yeah, I'm gonna do it now. Motion having been made and seconded, and then we'll submit it as part of the record.
Mr. Feeney.
All right, we had in our package this Quincy Amusements, Inc. document, and I propose that it be changed at paragraph 4. There are a couple of carrots in paragraph 1 for parentheses. Is that something that we need? I don't think so. Paragraph 4, strike the word technology and insert, I'll give this to you, Pauline, anyway, authentication procedure or system. At number 5, amended so it reads, and a non-transferable bracelet age identification system shall be employed, etc. Number 7 shall read, one or more Foxborough police officers as determined by the police chief, before it says private pay detail, and then add on the sentence, in the event that the license holder believes no detail is necessary, it may request that the police chief waive this requirement. Those are the conditions, and that was the motion. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion? Aye. Opposed? None.
Congratulations, man.
Welcome.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very
Look
much.
forward to seeing you.
Appreciate it.
Yes, can you maybe get something back to us for the next meeting? We'll take that up.
And Mr. Chairman, just before you guys leave, could you please, and I know you mentioned earlier, and I appreciate
I
it,
want to know who.
make a
who
special
town
effort to
Foxborough.
hire
It looks like a
Foxborough
Foxborough
people.
document.
absolutely.
So see
It's
if
a
we can
great
find
job.
out as to who generated that.
Yeah, let's do the job fair. Get out to the high school, see these center. Employ local people.
I think this is
Absolutely happy
the town
to.
of Foxborough, what the process is, not, this is the town of Foxborough. I think that, well, Randy Golson's name on it.
I'm just a small town lawyer asking some questions.
Well, that's, you know, but I saw Randy's name on it, that's where it's got to be. That's where it's got to be.
Thank you. See you later.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
See you later, Peter.
Thanks for the time, Andy.
It was,
Mr. Chairman, can I ask for 1 minute recess so we can,
Okay, we'll move along here. Randy, thank you for your patience. We're gonna go
Happy to
through
be
the
here.
CIP.
Yes. We're here to present to the board the recommendations from the CIP committee as a result of budget presentation meetings, discussions, and approval of capital purchases for FY09. The committee met on March 1st with all the department heads, listening to the presentations for various projects, equipment, and spent about half a day in the process. The total request coming in from all departments totaled $3,286,310. And after the discussions and review, the committee voted to recommend funding less than the requested amount based on our funding ability from the various funding sources. And the total approved by the committee was $2,675,410. In your packet, you have the list of original requests, and Appendix A illustrates by department the items approved by the CIP committee. And I'll run down that list and explain that to the board, answer any questions that you may have of that through me or with Randy here. First department was the Conservation Commission, and the committee approved $145,000 to repair the Carpenter Upper Pond Dam.
Andy, can I interrupt you there? Because there was a letter in the information pack. Is that the one that we were,
Those are follow-up letters
the
from...
Commonwealth of Massachusetts said we were in non-compliance with the dam safety order?
Yes, that's
It's
bureaucratic.
DAM.
Along with
Yeah.
380 other towns.
Yeah,
But
it's an annual notice process. We get served last year on our dams that we own. We've hired a consultant to assist us in evaluating the problems and coming up with an action plan. Last year, through the CIP process, we funded $170,000 for this project, and that money was earmarked for design and permitting process. This year, the money requested was to concentrate on the dam that was rated unsafe by the state. The original estimate to fully reconstruct and repair that dam was over $1 million. But after some discussions with the consultant and the Conservation Commission, it was determined that we could breach that dam and make small repairs to the area, so it was not an unsafe situation, and therefore wouldn't have to comply with all the other state regulations to rebuild the entire dam. So this $145,000 that was requested is to breach the dam and make some repairs.
Okay.
The second department we met with was the police department, represented by the chief. He had originally requested a cruiser and some new technology, a digital computer fingerprinting system, which would enable his department to immediately come up with questions on fingerprints that were lifted at crime scenes instead of waiting in a queue through an outside agency trying to get information back to the department. We thought it was really improved the efficiency of the department and felt it was important technology that the police would need in performing their function. That piece of equipment was $32,000, approved by the committee. The fire department made a request for several vehicles and equipment, and the committee went down the list and didn't approve everything, but what you see on Appendix A was approved by the committee. It was purchasing an SCBA cylinder cleaning equipment to clean the existing SCBA equipment that the department uses to fight fires. In addition, an EKG updated equipment was approved for both Rescue 1 and Rescue 2. And the committee also approved replacing Engine 25. Engine 25 was an older piece of equipment. It's 1984 GMC. It needs a lot of repairs, and it's really gone past its useful life to function in the department. For the highway department, Again, not all the items were approved by the highway superintendent, but the committee did approve a trackless tractor. This will replace one of the existing wheeled machines that he has for sidewalk plowing. But the cost of the tractor is $144,000 and includes several attachments for the tractor, a snow blower, snow plower, a street sweeper, etc. Also approved was a replacement of the stake body truck used by the tree department. It's an old vehicle with a lot of mileage on it. It has about 87,000 miles on it right now. But the main problem is the truck's experiencing body rot through parts of the frame and the rear body of the truck. It's a 1987 year. In addition, the committee approved replacement of 2 mowers, a 10-foot mower, which is a 1997, and a 6-foot mower, which is a 1991 mower. And they certainly need these to keep up with the maintenance of all the playing fields in the community. In addition, other than the equipment, the committee approved, recommending to the board, expenditure of the Chapter 90 funds we expect to receive from the state. And in the next several months, the highway superintendent will be putting together a list of projects for the board to approve under that $325,000 appropriation. School department came in with a list of needed items. Not everything could be approved with the available funding, but this list represents what the committee approved for the school department. They were replacing all the computers in the middle school, and it's part of their replacement program throughout the system. I think there are about 585 computers in that building right now, and their plans are to replace them. They were replacing 2 school buses. One is a wheelchair minibus. It's a 2000 and it has 108,000 miles on it. The other bus is a 77 passenger bus. It's a 1998 and it has over 100,000 miles on it. In addition, they'll be replacing 2 copiers in the school system, which have exceeded their capacity to produce reliable copies. Other projects approved were the replacement of all the VAT tile at the Taylor School. The tile in that building is over 40 years old, and it needs to be replaced. In addition, they approved the replacement of the lockers at the Igo School for the football team. The current lockers don't meet code. There's no ventilation. They're too small. So the school's lucky they haven't been cited for having this outdated equipment in there. And the last item approved by the committee in regards to the MSBA school funding project for the high school repairs, the roof heating system, etc.
Andy, can I ask one question?
Sure.
On the lockers? Who installs the lockers? A private company come in?
They'll go out to bid to replace them.
You know, what happens, I mean, because precious metals here, what happens to the steel of the old lockers? Where does that go? Do they take that with them? And
They'll just be disposing of them, I assume. I'm not sure what they will be doing with them.
because it's a lot of money.
Should I inform the school business administrator that there's an interest if it's not part of the bid for it?
I would think,
Make it part of the bid.
well, it's just a lot of money today. Metal is way up. So, I mean, just
I
something
know
to think of.
certain metals like copper, etc.
Or steel itself.
They'll go.
You can fit over $200 worth of scrap steel on a standard pickup right now. So if you do the multiplication.
Pound lockers into guardrails.
I'll,
I didn't know what they do with it.
I wouldn't be surprised, and the school business administrator is all over,
I'm sure he
such
is.
reuse issues like these. I'll bring it to his attention, if he hasn't thought about it already, and inquire, get back to you on what the plans are for it.
Great, thank you.
The last item on the school list is approving $230,100 for the MSBA feasibility study. And as the board knows, last December, the state put the Foxborough School Project on their funding list. And this is the first part of the process to evaluate what the total cost of the project will be and what
inadequate areas will be renovated. And this money will allow the school committee to pick an owner's project manager and an architect to put together the information that the state will need to review the project and approve the final design.
Andy, who makes up the committee that is making these recommendations?
The CIP committee?
Yes.
It's made up of 5 voting individuals, myself, the school superintendent, Mr. Leo Potter from the Water Board, Mr. Hickey, a member of this board, and chairman of the advisory committee, Lorraine Brew. And Randy Scollin serves as ex officio advisor to the committee, finance director.
When you're making your recommendations, do you hear from, do the department heads make recommendations to you as to what they
It's
think?
not our presentation, it's a presentation by the department head seeking either equipment or projects or repairs to buildings.
Is it fair to say that no department got everything it asked for?
No, it's true, not everybody
Yours?
gets,
No, I never get all that I ask for.
Okay.
no one ever gets all what they ask for.
An interesting part that
At home or here.
And you prioritize what is necessary, and you came up with what appears to be a rather healthy number, $2.6 million, which you're funding from various sources.
Yes.
And that's really what we need to spend on an annual basis on these kinds of things, isn't it?
Yeah,
Well, it's a budget that it sort of plays second fiddle to the operating budget.
Well, I know
There are always
that-
many more needs than we can fund, and we sort of put this on hold over the past 4 years because of the problems we had funding the operating budget. We didn't spend as much on the capital budget. And as you see from the amended 5-year plan, which is attached to your documents, which I would hope the board would approve also besides our recommendations for next year, there are many, many projects going on into the future.
If I could put a fine point on what the town manager just said, if you look at the first 5 years on the CIP plan, the first 5 years totals about $30 million of total capital, includes everything, buildings. But if you look at the plan for the next 5 years, which includes this year, that total as a plan is over $50 million. So certainly the capital plan is one that typically represents deferred needs and needs to get pushed out due to funding constraints.
Well, it's an important function of the committee to determine where to spend what the limited resources we have on capital, although it does appear to be healthy compared to what we were able to do 3 or 4 years ago. Questions for?
Well, basically, the money
Town
is
manager?
one-time income. It's not a revolving income, right? Correct?
Right.
It's one-time income.
Yeah, that's if you go down the funding schedule, you'll see for the non-enterprise accounts, meaning non-water, non-sewer, a bunch of one-time funds that were cobbled together in order to fund this package.
We do have a savings account somewhere.
The stabilization fund, is it called?
Stabilization capital account. These were this year. None of the major building projects were up. Whether it be the high school or the town hall or the library, but a big slug that's sitting in this capital stabilization account, from my perspective, is best applied, to a large project like that or projects, as opposed to sprinkled across a lot of smaller ones.
Questions? You looking for a vote of approval on this?
We ask the board to approve the list of recommendations each year, or I don't know whether you want to delete something from the list or vote to approve it as presented.
I'd only point out that as part of the committee, and I've been this board's designee for the last 6 years, along with the other people in the committee, we were able to address the priorities identified by the different department heads, and so each department head were able to receive their top priorities. So it was a good year for that we didn't have to parse. I think a lot of credit goes to Andy and Randy's team for being able to forward plan and ensure that receipts, free cash, and other appropriations are available to be able to fund these projects. We are in a better position than many towns in that we've got some very talented people who make sure that we have money for CIP expenditure, and although it's been lean the last 4 years, it has not been non-existent, and this shows strength in our planning and our overall conservative fiscal approach. So I think a lot of credit goes to those two gentlemen for making this work.
I'd like to comment on the street reconstruction. Is this the first time I've seen us put money other than the Chapter 90?
This is the Chapter 90.
That's all of the 325 of Chapter 90?
Yes.
I thought
It's an
that was
estimate.
on top of it.
No,
Okay.
that's an estimate, yeah.
All right, thank you.
Anybody? I'd like to make a motion that we approve.
Chairman, do we want
I'm
to check the audience first? I don't know if anybody had.
I did have a couple of questions on that. Sorry.
It's all right, maybe Mr. Feeney will have this chair someday, and I'll interrupt him. Just kidding. Go ahead, Dennis.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad the chief is here. I did ask a couple of questions about the fingerprinting system on the Saturday when the committee met, and a couple more have occurred to me, and I was curious, through the chair, how many times a year would fingerprints be used in a court case?
I think you directed that question to me. I don't know the answer to that. Do you know the answer?
Basically,
I'm asking through the chair.
John and
Oh.
while the chief's busy for 1 second, I'll try and answer your question, because I think I know the answer.
I'd rather have his, I'm sorry, with all due respect.
Okay, well, give him the answer I'm gonna give you, John. How much does this
John.
mean to the department about quickly, if there's a break in fingerprints and items rapidly through this digital fingerprint identification system? Having your own instead of having a fingerprint and to send it into Boston or the FBI, it takes, what, how many weeks?
We transport them up to Sudbury, the state labs,
Yeah,
where their staffing is
like
limited.
everybody's.
And it's not just necessarily for that, it's for identification of people who come in and give identifications other than their own. I think the chief would be best suited, though, to explain the whole ramifications of the system. I mean, I'm obviously a proponent of it. It's gonna help us do our job a lot better, a lot more efficient, and a lot quicker.
And an average house break-in, if you have fingerprints and you use this system, does it speed the case up dramatically, save man-hours?
It would
A lot of man-hours?
significantly improve operational efficiency, yes.
Okay.
Dramatic.
Chief O'Leary, Mr. Norton has asked on a regular, can you quantify how many times on an annual basis you have occasion to use fingerprint evidence in a court case? Is that accurate, Dennis?
Absolutely accurate.
Specifically to a court case, I could not quantify it, but I know on a regular basis, evidence that we gather at crime scenes concerning fingerprints is brought up to the state police lab, as I mentioned during the presentation, and then waiting to get that evidence back is very time consuming. In fact, Sergeant, Jim?
I talked to the chief within the last week regarding evidence returned from the state lab. House breaks from 2005, we're getting prints back now from the lab.
Which is why I want to answer the question, Dennis, because I had asked the question. That's why I wanted to answer it for you.
Thanks. I appreciate your good intentions, Mark. My last question on that is there any other police department in Norfolk County that has a system at the current time?
I think the Sheriff's Department has one of the earlier versions of this system, but in terms of a specific police department, I have not heard of any of my peers having one, especially in this immediate area.
We can rent them some space.
How will it work? How does the system work, and what's the benefit of it to have it now apparently on the cutting edge?
We deal with a lot of people that are arrested that don't have identification on them, and we'll be able to take their fingerprints and scan them into this system, and then electronically compare them with the database that the state police have, as well as with federal authorities through electronic linkages. We also will preload 500 fingerprint cards into the system of known people that we've dealt with, and when the detectives get a lift at the crime scene, they'll be able to enter that lift, scanning it in, that will then, through a mathematical formula, assess every one of those fingerprints on the 500 cards to see if there's comparison points between the lift that's taken by the detectives and compared with the fingerprints we have on file. If there is no contact with one of the cards preloaded or that we've entered through arrest, it would then be electronically sent to the state to do an electronic scan without having to wait in line, first with the state and then over to the federal authorities.
Chief, is this, the person that was apprehended, the bank robber, on, help me out, right off Mechanic Street, Edwards? Is it on Edwards Street?
Yes.
How was he identified?
John, do you recall on, I think he had actual identification on.
He did have actual identification on him, but as a check, we were talking about phony and altered licenses. We see an awful lot of also what's called international licenses, specific large-scale events that have been held in the town. We've had a significant problem as far as identification of parties either being arrested or placed in protective custody. We can't release those people until we can come up with a positive identification on those. It's labor-intensive in the aspect that we have to hold those people till we get a positive ID on them. A rudimentary example would be they're at the mercy of the federal government or the state to take a set of prints, fax them in. Depending on staffing, you might be able to get, if you ask that you have a specific issue, they might be able to, fast forward that a little bit for you. But for the most part, we're again at the mercy. This would be an instantaneous, almost an instantaneous response for us. Thus, not allowing us, not having us to babysit or hold on to people, is we'll be able to identify them through technology as opposed to, like the chief said, literally driving up when we have evidence that has to go up to the state lab and fingerprint cards, driving it physically up to Sudbury, handing the cards over, they go into a pile, and whenever they get around to getting them in due to their staffing issues, that's when we get it back in. Recently, we've been getting back results from 2005 from lists and print cards that we've submitted to the state lab.
And while a person's in custody, John, do you have to monitor that person 24 hours a day?
Also provide medical care as needed.
And food, blah, blah, blah.
And, yes.
So, it's why I also brought it up, because I think this thing pays for itself instantly as far as man hours goes, overtime, Dennis, and a lot of other things. I think it's a very good thing for the department to have.
Sounds like it could. Is that an accurate assessment, Chief, that it would pay for itself over time?
Well, in terms of making the officers' time more efficient,
Yeah.
because they're not gonna be traveling 2 hours to drop off a piece of evidence, and probably 4 is a better, because you drive there, you have to get in the queue
Yeah.
with other departments. So I think over time, the officers' efficiency should improve, because we're not spending time on a non-essential function
Or gas.
or gas.
$3
You have to
an
actually
hour.
pull someone who would normally be on patrol and send them up there, or is he somebody who
Or
would check?
it's one of the officers, but they're not interviewing other people, they're not typing reports, they're driving evidence up.
Yeah.
I mean, understand, there are certain types of evidence we will still have to bring up there that we don't have the expertise to deal with. However, the fingerprint evidence, which is the most common at a house break or a crime scene that the officers would gather, is the type of evidence we're bringing up there now.
The reason I asked also, Dennis, is because now they're coming up with the eye retina identification, all that, and I was very interested in that. The fingerprint's going to become a thing of the past as far as
That's
personal
another
IDs.
thought that I have, but I'm not gonna go there.
Yeah, as far as personal IDs goes, but you can't take somebody's eye prints off of evidence. That's why I brought it up. When
I don't claim to know the kinds of things about law enforcement.
No, me either.
Law enforcement people here know. I just
Yeah.
had a couple of questions.
In my opinion, it's very, very much going to be needed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Dennis, for asking the question.
My only question is, Chief, like you said, you didn't, always get what you want, but it looks like this digital computer fingerprint system was more important than the vehicle that you had originally wanted.
Absolutely.
Also. So, I mean, it seems like, you know, he didn't get everything he wanted, but that was more important than the vehicle he had put down originally, so there's something to be said for that.
Any other questions? I'd like, I thought I made a motion. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the summary of capital requests as submitted by the committee.
In the 5-year plan.
And the 5-year plan and assumed funding, which is really, not much we can do. That's,
Right.
it's a projection, but. Our motion to approve this year's requests and that we got a 5-year capital plan.
Linda second.
Second. Pauline, was that at all intelligible?
I work on it and will put it all
Okay.
together and make it. And it's seconded by,
Linda.
Linda.
okay.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you. Thank the committee. Lorraine, thank you for your work on the committee. Bob, I guess you guys spent almost a whole Saturday on that, right?
It's an enjoyable time. We got out in time for the Doolittle home auction.
They put on a better show than you guys do.
Mandy, you didn't mind having you wait because you're not charging us your overtime rate. And you're here having fun, so. Could be spending time with your family. Instead, you're having fun with us up here at Town Hall. This is where I want to be. Okay.
Do you want me to read the public hearing notice?
Yes.
The Board of Selectmen has scheduled a public hearing on Tuesday, March 11, 2008 at 7:50 p.m. in the Selectmen's Meeting Room, Town Hall. The purpose of the hearing is to discuss proposed amendment to the rules and regulations of holders of alcoholic beverage licenses in the town of Foxborough, which is to add a new paragraph 14A to read as follows. License holders shall be mandated to report large gatherings of 400 patrons or more, or multiple groups that collectively consist of over 750 patrons within the same time frame, and or event time at a facility when said event occurs after 6 p.m. on a weeknight or 4 p.m. on a Saturday, Sunday, or holiday to the Chief of Police. This will also be required on all days that the stadium has major licensed events. The purpose is to provide advanced information to the Chief of Police about large groups when alcohol is to be served, so that an evaluation of the event/gathering can be assessed for the need of a police detail assignment, and if not needed, to alert shift commanders of events. This notice will be reported at least 21 days prior to said event, and so analysis can be made on the circumstances that may require police supervision. Should the licensee disagree with the chief's requirement of the assignment of said detail, they may appeal said assignment to the Board of Selectmen. All interested persons entitled to.
Hearing notice having been read, Chief, this is a public hearing regarding a proposed rule and regulation. And why don't we go through it?
Well, if I could, Mr. Chairman, make a brief presentation. I have, based on some additional feedback, a proposed amendment to the regulation that I'll be sharing with the committee members, as well as some homework assignment reading for the board to do about some rationale behind, my reasoning that I want to have the advance notice. Section 14 of the current regulations does allow for the police chief to assign details at liquor establishments, and 14A would provide myself with the information as to make that assessment. As I had pointed out to the board back in December, I had sent out information to the various license holders in town, primarily our restaurant operations that have large groups of people drinking the alcohol on the premises. I actually had a meeting, as I reported to the board as well, with several of our facility managers. I learned a great deal about some of the operational issues that they face in serving alcohol and dealing with large groups. Based on that feedback, I sent out a new draft to the various people that participated in that meeting. I did not receive any feedback, so I developed some revised wording that I provided to the board approximately a month ago, so that if there was feedback from the board, I then sent out the proposed amendment that was read into the record to every liquor license holder that we have in the community, whether they're on-premises or off-premise licensees. I did receive excellent feedback in terms of wording from one of the licensees, and based on that, I actually have a new proposal that I'd like to distribute for the board's consideration. If we could start over here.
Edward, do you have an extra copy?
I think
It looks like
there
it,
may
Frank.
be an extra copy, Frank.
Thank
so.
you, sir. Thank you.
Thank you.
These are extras. Mike, does everybody have one?
This is the most recent draft.
Yes, in fact, I'm going to go over just some of my typos as I was typing it earlier today. As my
Afraid you
secretary
can't
was
find
out.
those?
Well, I'm sure you absolutely could, but it might help with the reading. If you go to the second sentence, circumstances whereby the licensee may reasonably, and it should be anticipate hosting. So the word anticipate. If we go down to the fourth paragraph, the last sentence, licensee, and it should be of such an event by the Board of Selectmen.
Listed.
Yeah.
Where is that?
Oh, yep.
Okay, if you're in the third paragraph down, the fourth sentence,
Oh,
Right.
it starts with licensee, and it should read of such an event.
The grant of a license to the licensee of such an event by the Board of Selectmen.
Yes. And starting on the second page, should the chief, well, it starts on page 1, should the chief assign a police detail under the provision of section 14 of these regulations, comma,
Yeah.
and the licensee disagrees, then it gives the licensee the option to, appeal before,
It says appear or appeal for,
well, may appear before the board, just as a, in any government entity, the public has a right to appeal any decision, and that would give the licensees that opportunity. In terms of the evaluation criteria, I would take a look at, the nature of the event, in particular the age of the different groups that might be involved, the day of the week. Weekends have, I've found in my experience as a police officer, a greater likelihood of having problems at liquor establishments. Time of day, the later in the evening it goes, the greater risk. The participant connection, if you're going to have a group together, is there a strong bond between the groups, such as, high school class reunion might have a stronger bond than someone just coming to a trade show or participating in some entertainment. Cash versus open bar has an impact on people's drinking behaviors. Multiple events in a common area. You might have different groups that are blending that ordinarily might not do so. The time of liquor service ending. The earlier we stop the service of alcohol, sometimes the better the event runs. Their experience in the liquor service industry, and the past history of the facility. All of these factors would be in my matrix of deciding the appropriate level of police details to be assigned.
Edward, would you not also want to consider the fact the amount of duty officers have on duty that night for some particular reason is somebody on vacation, somebody, if they don't fill the shift. Does that ever happen?
Well, as was mentioned at the earlier hearing, we run a very lean shift staffing on evenings and going into the midnight shift. So we don't, except on rare occasions, have what I would call good staffing. And I would just go on the premise that the purpose of assigning details is, one, preventative, because I think people behave more responsibly when they see a police officer. Number two, early intervention in many of the problems that sometimes develop in a facility. And three, we would have an initial response to mitigate any types of behavior issues that the officers haven't been able to prevent in an immediate fashion. And then, so that we're not tying up necessarily the resources of the shift.
Now, let's say your officer is on a detail and he's in a particular situation. His anticipation that he sees things getting a little unruly, slowly, just progressively getting worse. Would he report to you and ask you to send an additional officer for the detail?
He doesn't necessarily have to talk directly to me. That's why we have shift commanders.
I'm sorry.
That if the shift commander felt that the officer's observations required additional staffing, then he has that authority to bring those people in.
And I'm not trying to rush this at all, but if this is going to be a repetitive situation of what we just discussed in the first thing, should we move on with this, or do people have a lot more questions about this?
Well, we've just given, and I apologize for my rewriting of this, but I didn't know whether the board might entertain taking this under advisement, so you have an opportunity to review it and provide feedback, as well as an opportunity, and again, more homework that you don't probably want to do. But it's based not, by the way, on Ed O'Leary having these great thoughts, but actually the Office of Community Policing has spent a lot of time addressing different problems communities have, and where we're entering a new phase with the development of Patriot Place. And although it's primarily restaurants, there are going to be entertainment areas that may require additional police visibility. And that article I just passed out gives some various suggestions and just makes the board more aware of some of the problems that could be faced.
I was actually in conversation with the Patriots Place today, and you had done a lot of research with them, or held meetings with them, and they had made some suggestions,
Right.
and you had made some suggestions back.
Who were you talking to?
Dan Murphy.
You and Dan had a conversation about the
About
regulation?
this. Correct. And it came to, Peter, Tim, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I came to my assumption that he had no problem with this.
I haven't had a specific conversation. I know that I did receive feedback. I shamelessly rewrote some of Mr. Tam's feedback into my proposal.
Tried to make it better,
Well,
and he can't bill you for that.
I hope not.
Mr. Chairman, to answer Mr. Sullivan's question, we did appreciate, and through Dan Murphy, appreciate the chief's opportunity for licensees to comment on these regulations. Dan has not had the opportunity to review this as revised.
Oh, it was revised?
Right.
I
Okay.
would say it's fair to say it's substantially similar to all the issues. It was a very appropriate time when the issue came up, because we were with the chief and Andy discussing the national amusement case. And it was perfect timing. They are probably one of the licensees that could potentially be impacted. In leaving, I told them this is an issue that we have to reserve judgment for any licensee that we may represent, or those that are interested, for which, so long as this works from an operational standpoint, from a business standpoint, we're supportive of this type of regulation.
I make the same lame joke too much, Peter. You have a professional expertise that you're willing to lend and be on behalf of your client. On the other hand, what you say may make sense, and I appreciate your input. I think it does make sense to try to get input of those that are impacted,
The only
make the
substantial
regulation work.
The only comment, Mr. Chairman, and I'm sorry to interrupt.
Oh, you were asked.
Said enough.
No, not an interrupting.
The chief did identify some specific criteria that are very good, and it may be worthwhile, not that it be limited to those criteria, but they be specifically inserted here. So when he says, taking into account various relative factors, maybe that means various relevant factors, including but not limited to, and then list those because I think a business owner will want to know what is going into the chief's determination and what can they look to if there is any disagreement.
Just on that, and we also, when we talked, when you were here earlier on the other matter, we try to make the conditions too specific, they might not work. Whereas if we rely on Chief O'Leary, if a particular business doesn't like the way the bylaw is being policed, then they can come and see us and determine whether or not it needs to be changed, rather than to try to take into account various relevant factors. Well, we're going to rely on the chief's discretion. If you had a list and you wanted to propose...
Oh, no, there was the chief's list that I heard.
Did he just?
Right, I just read off factors that would
You're
go
willing
into.
to insert those into this
I have no problem with that.
regulation now?
And Mr. Chairman, I would not suggest to give you your point about flexibility, that they not be limited to those factors. But as a guide, I
Okay.
think it might be helpful.
Well,
I'm just concerned, Mr. Chairman, that in the future that you know, an attorney could make a reasonable case that, you know, there's an implication that those would be the priorities and those would be the relevant factors that would be, you know, up to the chief to
I would agree completely with Mr.
decide. So, I mean, I think there's a reason why, you know, Mr. Tam's draft had it, and there's a reason why the chief left it on. I would submit that, you know, I would agree just leaving it up to the chief and not including any specific factors.
Linda's...
My only question would be, what was the feedback from other license holders in town?
I did not,
You didn't-
I did not receive any.
You didn't get anything? I thought you said you had some positive feedback. Was that from?
Well, that was, you know, from the meeting that I met with some of the licensees that
Yeah.
did come in,
Yeah.
just to talk about the issue and, you know,
And it was positive? And
right.
Good.
This is a public hearing, and there are two police sergeants here. Is this, can I ask you, is this an outgrowth of what we worked on, which was proposed last year? Was there some kind of regulation to deal with large crowds in the service of alcohol?
A Malden bylaw?
It is. So this has been a progress, this is a work, this is the chief's, but this is a work that has been in progress really almost for a year now.
Yeah, ever since.
Okay.
Was what I was gonna bring up, James, is that this has been in progress for about a year, and I would think that if the chief wants us to take this under advisement and review it and come back with any ideas or critique it in any way, or anybody else wants to, we should have another public hearing, or continue this public hearing, and invite all other parties that want to attend to come, so that we can finally put an end to this.
Well, we've already noticed it,
Right.
published it. Anyone who is interested in it can come tonight, and if they're interested, they can hear us continue it to the next meeting.
Right.
I would say, if we do that, maybe you want to take your draft and given the changes that you
Right,
made.
yes.
Maybe you want to resubmit it, maybe you want to give some thought to whether or not you want to enumerate
Okay.
factors. And if you decide not to, maybe you can
Discuss why.
tell us why you
Okay.
don't think it's appropriate. Give Mr. Tam an opportunity to present what he thinks are reasonable. And,
Not to be contrarian, but we have worked on this for a year. I think this is very well crafted. It addressed all of my concerns I expressed a year ago. As you know, I was not a
Right.
proponent of the way it was originally worded from you, and I apologize if I came down strongly before, but I think this is a much more workable regulation. I think we have a much greater ability to enforce, and you have much more latitude as far as how you determine the needs. So
Well, I'd like to do that. I'd like to take it under advisement and just do a redraft, chief. Come back in, it shouldn't take more than a few minutes.
You want an agenda item?
I make a motion that we continue this hearing to March
Is it
25th,
25th? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't have a calendar here.
8 o'clock.
Well, I can't give it time. Can't give you the time because we have other things on the agenda.
Will you come back on it?
Oh,
And
certainly,
talk
yes.
to Peter
It
and-
will give me an opportunity to clean up the language that I unfortunately had to have you handwrite in.
And if you decide, yes, a motion made, second, if you decide that you want to include some factors, Paul has expressed misgivings, Linda, anybody, feel free to reach out to one of us and
Okay.
and talk to us.
I would support Paul's position of anytime you create too many specific areas that you can hang your hat on to support, you can create those same arguments against enforcement of a difference. So I would
Discussion on the motion.
Mr. Chairman, just as a point of order, is it necessary to continue the public hearing? Or could we close the public hearing and then decide as a board what action we want to take on the next meeting?
This is true.
I mean, I just don't see, the meeting's been posted, people had the opportunity to come up and speak on it.
I think, and this is more to the point of order, I think traditionally, if, it does the same thing, but if we were to close the public hearing and then we return at the next meeting and we had additional questions and we couldn't ask them.
Couldn't we reopen the public hearing?
Well, we could certainly ask questions as a board.
Yeah, but we could reopen the public hearing too, but I think Bob's got it right. No matter what, we'd have to reopen it if it was an onslaught from here, you know?
I
don't necessarily have a right, but
It's clean to
my
continue it.
experience.
Clean to continue it.
I hate to cite tradition as being a source of any decision made, but I think in this case, that's what I'm going to cite.
Yeah, you know what, I don't even want to let this go another meeting, but under the chief's opinion that we should, I will, because this is the 4th or 5th time it's come in front of us. Enough is enough, let's get something done. And
Chief has gotten something done.
No, I know he has, but no, it's time for this board to act. Instead of, we sent him back and forth traveling with the suitcase 5 times now. It's time to react.
Which is why, Mark,
Will you come back in a couple of weeks?
Oh, absolutely,
I'll
Mr.
concede
Chairman.
the point afterwards. But I mean, that's why I said let's close the hearing, so that we don't put ourselves at risk of having, more people come in 2 weeks and say, well, I know we had the opportunity to speak, but we didn't come. Now we want to.
But this is gonna get some paper now, Paul, and if we didn't reopen the hearing, it's not fair to us to close out the public, is my opinion.
No, I agree, and that's why, I'll concede in the spirit of transparency and openness to government that we continue. I just think, from now on, if we post a meeting, we have a decision to make as a board, then, we should be careful and continue on the hearings.
I think that's a point well made, Paul. Chief?
When I do complete my editing, so to speak, I can mail it out to all the license holders again,
I don't see why,
so that way, there won't be anybody after the fact that would say, well, why wasn't I told?
That's
just as a thought.
An exercise of good government.
I appreciate what you're saying, Paul. I'd like to end things, I'd like to move it along, but we have worked on this. There have been a number of drafts, it's the chief's now. There's a motion to continue the public hearing. We've asked the chief to do some things, to come back in a couple of weeks. At that point, I think if the motion carries, we'll close the public hearing and make a decision on where we stand. Any more discussion on the motion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None. Thank you, Chief.
I think Andy has determined that 8:45 would be the time that we would reconvene this public hearing.
The real 8:45?
Well, that's what I was gonna say too, Chief, is, the public hearing was scheduled for 7:50 and,
You can't,
you know.
when someday I won't sit here, Chief, maybe you can start counting on the agenda time again, but I don't have a
Well,
real good
realistically-
track record of keeping to the clock.
We'll bring out the,
We're gonna do,
Realistically, it's 11.
we're gonna move on to some
Right
action
now?
Thank you.
items,
I know.
if we may, Andy.
We have a dozen action items to get through. First item on the list is the approval of your minutes of the February 26th meeting.
I have something.
Linda?
Colleen, on the first paragraph, right at the very end, you said, auction off at the silent auction.
No, okay, yes, yeah,
Don't, take silent out,
okay,
cause it wasn't.
okay.
And just at the end, put on FCA Channel 8, just so they know it was.
On what?
FCA Channel 8, just so they know it was on cable, it wasn't in, at the Doolittle.
Did
That's all I
that
have.
change anything else? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none. The next item happens to be a Norfolk County item, and I was, in November, I was fortunate enough to be hired by Norfolk County as the executive assistant to the Norfolk County Register of Deeds, Bill O'Donnell, and I have been at Norfolk County full-time since the first week of November. I continue to have my regular law practice, so I'm a busy guy as I sit here at this table on a regular basis. But because of my employment status with Norfolk County, I would respectfully recuse myself from this discontinuance of a portion of Summer Street, and I'll turn that over to you, Mark.
Andy, you wanna bring that up?
Did I mention I'm the executive assistant to the Register of Deeds?
Well, I think Frank's smelling a story over there, so you better be careful.
Yeah.
This was brought before the board back in January of 2007 by Attorney Mitchell,
Yep.
who represented the individuals involved with the discontinuance. It's gone through the process with the county commissioners, and it's back for the board to officially sign off on it.
Right. Is everybody familiar with this?
Yep.
I mean, it was pretty clear, it's all the paperwork's been done. Bob, you in
Yes.
good standing with this? I'll entertain a motion.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Vice Chairman, I would make a motion that we accept in consideration of $1, that we discontinue the portion of Summer Street between East Street and Willow Street as detailed on the plan on file with Norfolk County Register of Deeds, number 752, sheets 2 and 3 of the 1947 in Plan Book 142. And further, a portion of the East Street layout of April 29, 1958, as shown in the plan on file with the Norfolk County Registry of Deeds, Plan number 527 of 1958, and Plan Book 205.
Second.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. 401, Pauline. James who's recusing, obviously.
Andy?
Item 3, it's an invoice for town council services for the month of January. It's in the amount of $1,344. I recommend approval.
Make a motion that we approve payment of invoice number 14920 in the amount of $1,344.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. All those in favor? Aye, opposed, none.
Item 4, invoice for labor council services from February 1st through the end of February, the amount of $2,012.50.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve payment to Collins Lock and Pelican, invoice dated March 4th, 2008, in the amount of $2,012.50.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Did we pay him the $2231.25?
Yes.
Okay. Motion made and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye, opposed, none.
Item 5, I have before the board the renewal of the Class 1 license for Hedges and Mathis business on 3 Phelps Drive. They paid their renewal fee. The reason this wasn't presented to the board back in January when you were licensed, there were some outstanding fees,
Oh, I see.
things due the town, so they've been all resolved. So he's.
Mr. Chairman, I make a motion that we approve the reissuance of the license for agents or sellers license Class 1 for the sale of second-hand motor vehicles to Hedge and Mathis Company of 3 Phelps Drive in Foxborough.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? None?
Item 6, Mr. James Carey has requested to be reappointed as a constable in the town of Foxborough. His current term expires. This would be a reappointment for 3 years. He submitted an up-to-date bond with the town clerk.
How long has he been a constable? Anybody, any idea?
I haven't gone back to check the record.
I mean, we appointed one last year.
We have a number of them marked.
Yeah, oh, I understand that.
We can
but-
never have too
Enough?
many constables.
Okay, I'll go with the 6-year veteran over here.
I
was
make
gonna
a
ask-
motion that we approve the application by James A. Carey of 1004 Pheasant Lane in Middleborough to be reappointed as a constable in the town of Foxborough.
Second. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None?
Item 7, we have a letter from Dina Cummings from Foxborough J.C.'s regarding the planned Easter egg hunt for March 16th on the Common. They're requesting to use it from 12 noon to 2 p.m. in addition to a rain date of March 22nd. And that time would be 10 to noon.
Mr. Chairman, I am a member of the Foxborough J.C.'s. I'm not a member of the Board of Directors, nor am I an officer in the organization. I suspect Linda's going to say the same thing.
Ditto.
Make a motion, allow the J.C.'s to use the common for the annual Easter egg hunt on the 16th of March, the rain date of the 22nd.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None?
Should be two recused, I don't know.
Item 8, a letter from Thomas Murphy requesting permission to use town property across from Elm Street Public Works building for the Foxborough Household League, which they start on April 14th, will run through playoffs on September 30th. They've done this over a number of years in the past, and we've had no problems.
Yes, this is an annual group. I would like to make a motion that we approve the Foxborough Horseshoe League use of the town property off Elm Street as outlined in the application, a letter dated February 27th.
Second.
Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? None?
Mr. Chairman, I did notice that the Board of Selectmen doesn't have a team in the Horseshoe League.
You gonna organize one, Paul?
Yeah, we might have to.
You don't have enough things to do, huh? Street commissioner, Rotary commissioner.
So I will support that if we change the dates to Tuesday nights that we play.
Yeah, right, perfect.
Every other?
Item 9 has been withdrawn. Item 10 is a note the town planner sent around various officials about a meeting to be scheduled for March 26th at 2 p.m. to meet with state public works people to talk about alternative routes to reestablish rail service to Fall River and New Bedford. They want input from our community, so I'll be attending the meeting. I don't know if any of the board members want to go to it.
I know I won't be that day.
I might be
March
able to.
5th? No.
No, March
26th.
26th. March 5th was...
26th, I'm doing Meals on Wheels.
Okay. Well, if you can make
Well,
it...
since you're doing that, then I'll do this.
Item 11, Mr. William Fleming, Senior Vice President of Operations at Caritas Hospital, has invited the chairman, or I assume members of the board, who's ever available, to attend a meeting on March 26th at 5:30 at the hospital.
Well, thank you for the invitation. If anyone can attend.
Michael Stan went last year, he said it was very interesting. That's the 26th again.
Yeah, I'll make sure I can go to that channel if I'm available, definitely.
I know Mrs. Muchacho, she's a wonderful person. Paul, let's get together on that, let's check our calendar, it's at night, I just gotta check at home.
Great, that'd be great. Next.
Item 12, Chairman was sent this letter by Mark Ward, Group Manager of Eastern Service Center System Support. Basically, they're trying to get the town of Foxborough involved with this Community Advisory Committee on the flight paths for Logan Airport.
What are your thoughts, Andy? Because I think it's kind of, we got enough on our plate, but...
This is not the first time.
Well, it's not some correspondence last summer about
Yeah.
this study they were going through. This is not an environmental review, they're just trying to get input. So I don't know if anyone wants to get involved with this or not.
Are they planning a meeting or anything?
They talk in a letter about having a couple of meetings, but no dates.
They're not, I didn't read it as them actually asking us to do anything. Appreciate your consideration in this matter and looks forward to your participation in this important endeavor. I would anticipate if they have something that's coming up, they would notify us. I think that, yeah, we fall marginally in the area of the flight path to Logan, so I think sometimes it's important that if we have communities in eastern Massachusetts that are looking for solidarity with us on any issue that affects the greater Foxborough area, that we at least be willing to participate. But I don't see them asking us to participate. We are writing to provide an update. We will hold 2 meetings to provide elected officials an update. So when the meetings come up, maybe one of us will be able to attend the meeting and represent our interests.
I would think, James, that would be on a Republican, our Republican representative or our state senator, James Timothy, on the Democratic side. Wouldn't that sound more to represent
Yeah,
multiple
the area
towns?
that's-
I believe this is, I think Jim's
think
correct
it's
on
just
this, and I think we
information.
should just wait till they contact us, and we should participate, even if it's only as much as to update the rest of us if there's any issues.
It's an FAA
The worst thing would be
letter.
that if they were to change their flight patterns and bring their flights down lower, and then it somehow adversely impacts us, and we didn't know because we didn't pay attention. So I support Jim on this, and let's just wait and see what happens.
Right, it's coming from the FAA, so if they set up a meeting, maybe we'll go.
Right.
We probably won't.
Maybe we will.
We'll be playing horseshoes.
Maybe we will be.
That's it, right?
One more.
Yeah, one more.
No new, no old, right?
Oh, yeah.
Still gonna do this, huh?
Given the board, well, the first page is a list of the 29 articles proposed for the warrant, and you have a draft copy of the warrant. It's not complete. You'll note that we don't have Article 4, the operating budget, or Article 5, the capital budget, inserted yet, and there's some other information that we have to include on the street articles. But I'll just run down the list quickly, so the board's
Right.
aware what's in here. And we'll continue to finalize this and bring it back to the board for approval. Article 1 is the town election of the officers for the various boards. Article 2 is the purpose for any town officers making reports to town meeting. 3 is reports to town committees. 4 is the operating budget. 5 will be the capital budget. 6 is the article for raises for the non-union employees. 7, 8, and 9, if we hopefully have these contracts settled, we'll be funding the fire, police, and library contracts. 10, 11, and 12 are revolving funds. 10 is the annual revolving fund for the recreation department. 11 is the revolving fund we created for the set aside for the police and fire vehicles used in details. And 12 is the revolving fund for the Patriot Place project that needs reapproval. 13 is the article allowing the board to expend state funds for highway purposes. Article 14 is the article the assessors submit to the warrant authorizing approval for them to issue exemptions and abatements to the elderly and veterans who qualify. 15 is an article submitted by Chief O'Leary to accept Chapter 31, Section 51A. Since we only have one civil service department in the community, that being the police department, it would only apply to them and not the fire. But it would set an age restriction on the age of a person we would hire for the police service. In this case, would be 32 years old, unless he was a veteran. He could add on 4 more years to his age. Article 16 was a petition submitted by citizens trying to create some definition for the dog park.
Does, all of these are still being worked on, is that what it is?
Not, no.
Only a couple.
I'm working on Article 4 and Article 5.
Okay,
Um,
right.
The last 5 articles, 4 or 5 articles, the street acceptances are incomplete, we're working on those. The rest of them are pretty much in final form. These petitions, I cannot, and the board cannot change or amend. It's came in by petition.
Okay.
They've got the required votes, they've been certified by the town clerk, so they have to go on the warrant. The only way to amend something like that would be on the town meeting floor. They have to go on the warrant as petitioned.
You can only amend it once, correct?
No, you can amend
What
one.
happened last time where they kept amending it, they're still trying to amend it, that we couldn't continue doing it? Because it changed the structure of the whole
You
content.
can't change the structure of the article. You can't amend an article to the point where, you can't put Volvo hubcaps on a Mercedes and call it a Volvo. You gotta keep the amendments in keeping with the original motion.
That's what it was, Bob, thank you. Yeah. You can't tweak it so much that it's not the same.
It turns into a Volvo.
Yes.
17 was a petition article by the police union, trying to put together a bylaw for details for public gatherings.
So that's the one that's
Seven.
what I was getting at
Okay.
is, this one here is the one that the chief just brought up, or is it a
No,
different one?
Different one.
Police union submitted that one,
Yep.
not the chief.
Well,
So-
citizens of the community were certified as,
Well, I'm telling you,
Petitioners.
I'm just explaining who presented it to me, Paul,
Right.
that's all, yeah, correct. Citizens of the community signed it, but Mr. Grace presented it to me to put on the warrant.
Yes.
Article 18 is a zoning article, which was reinserted. It's to address rezoning the property on,
Is that, that came up and went down in the fall. Does this
Just for the
change the
train,
landscape on that article? I haven't
well,
studied it yet.
what it does is, instead of making it by special permit through all the districts,
Site
it
specific.
reduces it to, 3 or 4?
Okay.
Highway business, limited
So-
industrial, general industrial, and S1, I think it is,
Right.
by
Doesn't
special,
let
by
it-
special
It
permit.
can't be a 40B, this and that, and
Right.
4, 14, 15.
Okay.
Article 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, and 24, submitted by the Sewer and Water Commission. It's in regards to the regional sewer treatment plant. Article 19 would establish a regional sewer authority. 20 would amend the intermunicipal sewer agreement. 21 would establish a municipal sewer district. 22 would just change zoning that would allow for a sewer overlay district by zoning. And 23 is any appropriations or bonding authority they may seek. 24 would be to amend the comprehensive wastewater management plan. And Articles 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 would be to accept streets as listed by the planning board: Hill Street, Holbrook Street, Hitchcock Road, Harnden Road, and Hayden Drive.
Anyone have any questions? What's the procedure from here in terms of the warrant? What are you looking for us to do tonight, and when will we see it again?
Well, we'll try to get it back to the board by the end of the month, if we can get it finalized for board's final approval. The deadline has long since passed where people could bring in articles for the warrant. It closed on February 15th.
I
According to-
withdraw my placeholder for the ongoing dam issue at Deposit Reservoir.
According to town bylaw, February 15th was the cutoff date, unless the board itself is going to put something on the warrant. But I wanted to go on this because I need to get it finalized.
Sent to print.
Well,
Give the
that'll
planning
be.
board adequate time to review it, because they always run up against the timelines, because they have regulations, they have to get it printed in the newspaper in order to be able to educate the voters.
We'll get it to the printer and back the town meeting.
So you just gotta tweak a few things up, and then we're gonna vote on it.
Right, you don't have the operating budget in this, you don't have the capital budget, like I said,
Yep.
and some other information. The street acceptances has to be finalized.
Will we have that in 2 weeks?
I will try to get it done.
What if it isn't?
Uh,
Can we go to the
We may,
first meeting in April?
we may need a special meeting, Jim, to finalize it, so I can get it to the printer.
Now, we have a meeting the 25th, and then the next one, is that the 8th?
It's in April, I think, yeah.
April 8th?
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Well,
So I don't
then
know
we
if-
don't need to take any action tonight.
It's not complete, no, I can't actually take
We'll
action.
wait and see if you can get it done for the next meeting, and I know you'll try. So, that concludes the list. Anything added on?
No.
Any more discussion on the warrant? Okay, is there anyone have any new business?
No, I do not.
Couple of things. I did ask Attorney Tewey to get back to us. I kept a draft of what it is I requested him to do relative to that. Looks like Town of Foxborough Patriot Place liquor license application project. I'll just keep that in my folder and bring it up next time. There is an MSA regional meeting. I would like to go, I will not be going. This is the Massachusetts Selectmen's Association meeting organized by the Norfolk County Selectmen's Association. If anyone can go, I try to attend those Norfolk County Selectmen Association meetings on a regular basis. It's a great way to just talk for a while about municipal government and share common problems with other area selectmen. So it's held at the Needham Golf Club, but I don't think they're playing golf.
Count me out.
April 2nd, I can't do it. I already had, that's what it was. I had
No
something
golf,
for
no
April.
me.
I can probably attend.
If you can, I
I'll
think it
be happy to
would
go with somebody else.
be great.
What's the date, Jim?
Wednesday the 2nd.
Wednesday the 2nd,
Thank you.
5:45 to 8 p.m.
If we go together, we can cover both sides of the aisle and we'll have a good time. There won't be a quorum.
It's always good to have balance, Bob.
That's right, brother.
We are looking for an applicant to take the position of Mr. Girardin on the school committee.
Mhm.
And I think we have, Dana Agata has expressed some interest in that position, I think today.
We asked him to file a letter.
And he's gonna file a letter. If anyone else is interested in the position or knows anybody, we would like to get some representation on that school committee during the budget time. So it is important that we get something going. There was a ruling, we've had this issue relative to the rights of way and our ability to charge under our bylaw. A ruling came down from the Appellate Tax Board last week saying that cities and towns have the right to tax telephone poles and wires over public ways. We are waiting still for an opinion of Attorney Epstein. And Bob, when did you expect that?
It's a good question. I thought it would have been in by now.
Yeah, I did too. We'll call him, Jim,
So
to
that issue
chase
is-
that down.
It's in a
I
state of flux
actually-
now, whether that.
I should have asked him about that at the last meeting of the CTAC. I will ask him if Andy does not.
Well,
So we'll
what,
follow up on that.
what exactly is gonna happen, I don't really know. This was a appellate tax board decision, so I'm assuming that that's reviewable by the appeals court of the SJC, so it remains in a state of flux. And I think that's all I had for new business. Mark, we talked about the McGinty Room Memorial, and you checked in with the fire department, and they do have something planned.
Yeah,
For that.
it's in motion, and
Right.
that's pretty much all there is to say.
We did receive the $960,000 agreement mitigation payment. It was due on the 3rd of March, came in right around then,
Came in the Friday before.
Friday before.
okay?
March 29th.
Okay, that's all I have for new business. Old business,
I guess it would be ongoing business.
ongoing,
I don't know.
that'd be old.
Is there such
Yeah,
a thing?
Oldish, newish?
We spoke briefly at the end of the meeting about the Rotary on North Street again. So this letter from Bob Swanson to Mark Resnick, is this talking about the Rotary that already exists?
That's a good question.
What does the letter say?
Read on.
Well, I mean,
That was
it's
in the information packet?
Yeah.
review of
Let's go
North
over
Street
that.
rotary plans and Beach Street plans.
That would be the new road.
That would be the new one.
So, we're getting a memo, a one-page memo, comments from Bob Swanson about catch basins, about a rumble strip, but we haven't seen anything come across our desk for actual discussion. My question is this a done deal, and we just,
We're waiting for the planning board to submit that to us.
No.
They've asked for his comment.
Okay,
Yeah, that's what that's all about.
There's copied on it.
Yeah.
Planning board
That's all.
voted 3-2 to approve it, and then, the citizens, in the area have called Paul, myself, yourself, I'm sure,
Mhm.
everybody else on the board, and we responded, and,
It's not
Yeah,
done.
that's a
I mean, a memo just comes like this, and I don't know if it's, which it's referring to, if it's
it should
referring
have
to
said Spear
the one
Basin
already,
Road.
or,
It should have said, we should have referred to.
and
Basin
what
Road.
it was, his response was from, that's all, 'cause we didn't have anything. Okay.
Okay, so we're gonna wait on that.
Yeah.
It's in our,
Yep.
it's in our, I believe it's in our province to make the final decision on that, and I'm hopeful that this board will make the final decision on that in the best interest of the town of Foxborough.
Motion to adjourn?
Mr. Swanson here at the meeting when we have that plan.
You'll invite him to the meeting when it's on the agenda?
Oh, yes, yeah.
Well, that's, yeah. And it'll be in the paper so that folks will know
Yeah.
that we're,
Well, it has to be an agenda item.
right.
Hearing no second, we'll stay in session.
Second,
Um,
and happy
hear it.
Easter, everybody.
All those in favor?
And
Aye.
happy St. Patrick's Day.
Happy St. Patrick's Day.
Son's birthday.
You're gonna go to the.